Alright, so which of these is the smallest acute angle? C. Why is it C? Across from the small side. So what's my hypotenuse? My opposite. And then that means 48 is my adjacent. So we'll do sine first. So sine from angle C. Sine is what side over what side? Opposite over hypotenuse, which here would be 14 over 50. Tomorrow on your quiz, you're going to be asked to leave it in a fraction. So you would need to reduce. What is 14 over 50 reduced to? Please know you're not using your fancy calculators tomorrow. So you do need to know how to reduce in general. I'm sure you do. 7 over 25, what does that become in decimal form? 0.28. This one says decimal form to the nearest thousandth. How many decimal places is 1,000? 3. All right, then we move to cosine. Cosine from angle C. Cosine is adjacent over hypotenuse. So what's my adjacent? 48. My hypotenuse is still 50. What is this reduced to? 24 over 25. And then what is this in decimal form? 0.96. All right, and then last we have tangent. Tangent from C is opposite over adjacent. So what's my opposite? 14, and my adjacent? 48. What is this reduced to? 7 over 24. So what is this in decimal form? 292. Good. Yesterday, when we did these problems, there were 3 steps. What was the very first step? Do we remember? Label your sides. Thank you. So label your sides. Step 2 was to set up a trig ratio. And then 3 was to solve for x, solve for y, whatever variable it gave you. These were our three steps. So on our problem, we have 20 degrees. So we need to label our sides from 20 degrees. What kind of side is 10? Opposite. What kind of side is x? Adjacent. All right, so which trig function, even though it tells you, which trig function deals with opposite and adjacent? Tangents. So you'd set up an equation with tangent. Tangent from what angle? 20. Equals the opposite over the adjacent. So my opposite is 10 over my adjacent, which is x. Can I just multiply both sides by 10 the way it looks right now? No, I can't. So what do I need it to look like?
1 over 10, 20 equals x over 10.
I need to flip. 1 over tangent of 20 equals x over 10. So now what will I do to both sides?
Multiply by 10.
Multiply by 10. And then we type this whole thing in your calculator. Does it matter that I put 1 over tangent?
Yes.
Yes, it does. Do you want half your paycheck or do you want double your paycheck? I would want double. So the fraction is very different. So what is 10 times 1 over tangent of 20? What do we say? 27.5. That's it. So today we're doing the same thing with sine and cosine. That's it. Here we go. Flip. So in this section, it'll warm us up to one new thing we're learning today. So we're going to find sine of s, sine of r, cosine of s, cosine of r. I'm not going to do it in the order they list it. I'm going to find sine of s and cosine of s. And then I will find sine of r and cosine of r. Sine of r. So in that order, less confusing in my humble onion. So from angle S, we want to find sine. So we're going to need to know our sides. So go ahead and label them opposite, adjacent, hypotenuse. Sine has which side over which side?
Opposite over hypotenuse.
Opposite over hypotenuse. So what is my opposite of angle S?
63.
63 over my hypotenuse, which is... So I believe it says answer as a fraction and as a decimal. Am I right? Yeah, so that's part of the answer. Type it in your calculator. 63 divided by 65. Is it 2462? No. This one's 0.97.
96.
But then the 9 makes the 6 round up to a 7. Because it says 4 decimal places. Never mind. 0.9692. You're right. All right, and then we find cosine, which is adjacent over hypotenuse. So what's my adjacent? 16. My hypotenuse, 65. Can this be reduced? No. What does this become as a decimal? 0.2462. Yeah? All right, so now we're going to do everything from the perspective of R. Which one of these sides will not change? The hypotenuse. But my opposite will now be 16, and my adjacent will now be 63. So finding sine of R, bless you. What is my opposite now? 16 over 65. That looks very, very familiar. You shouldn't have to type in your calculator because we've already found 16 over 65. And that's 0.2462. The last one is cosine of R, which is adjacent over hypotenuse. So here, my adjacent is now 63 over 65, which becomes 0.9692. So if you notice, do you notice the pattern here? You should. So sine and cosine have a relationship with each other. And that's what leads us to the next part of this lesson. Sine and cosine are complementary angles. What does complementary mean? They add up to 90. So here is what this means for us. If I have sine of 16, it is equivalent to cosine and the complement of 16. What is the complement of 16? 74. They add up and equal 90. So here's what I'm going to do to prove it to you. These two are equivalent to each other. They're written in different terms. So I want you in your calculator to type in sine of 16. That is the only thing you'll type in. Sine of 16 and enter. We're going to round to 4 decimal places. 2756. Now you're going to type in cosine of 74. .2756. So in this section, you'll be rewriting sine in terms of cosine. All you do is write cosine, you subtract from 90, and that would be the answer. You can also do it if I had cosine of 16. To rewrite that in terms of sine, you would have sine of 74. So this is what it means. This section is not super difficult, but if you don't study it before your quiz or your test, these are like meant to be like gifts from me to you. Like simple problems that don't require very much work, but you have to look over this. So I'd put a star next to it. Most of my students, now again, I've never taught honor students. Most of my students forget this by the time they take their quiz or test. So this is the algebra way to show it. We don't have to write it like this. This is the way your book shows it. We're going to rewrite cosine of 23 in terms of sine. So you can't rewrite in terms of sine without the word sine. We write the abbreviation. And then we do 90 minus 23. What is 90 minus 23? 67. How could I check myself that this is correct?
67 plus 23.
No.
You type in sine 67, you type in cosine 23.
Yeah, type them both in, and they should equal each other. Whatever sine of 67 is, cosine of 23 should equal as well. We're not going to do that here because I know the answer is right because I've done this 4 times today. But here we are. Rewriting sine of 56 in terms of cosine, we're going to write cosine. And then what is 90 minus 56? 34. Questions on this? Okay. Find the values of u and t using sine and cosine. Round your answers to the nearest tenth. So we're going to do the same thing that we've been doing. From the angle we're given, we're going to label all of our sides. Opposite, adjacent, and hypotenuse. Once we label them, we're going to choose which letter, bless you, we would like to solve for. Want to solve for u or t? Which?
T.
Sure, let's solve for t first. So yesterday, when we did this, we used tangent from angle 65, and it equaled the opposite over the adjacent. Well, what's my opposite here? T, and what's my adjacent? So could I use tangent here? No, I don't know enough information. So this was why we have 3 trig ratios. We're going to use the side we're looking for and the side that we were given. So we're going to use the opposite as well as the hypotenuse. So we need to decide which trig function is the opposite and the hypotenuse. Sine. So we're going to say sine from, what do we say, 65 equals the opposite, which is t, and then over 8. Do I need to flip anything, or can I just multiply? Multiply. Round to the nearest tenth. She's not mad. We get 7.3, yeah? All right, so then we move on. Do we have any questions on t? Okay, we're going to move on to the letter u. So we know we're going to use the adjacent. You still want to use the side that was given to you. So pause. Some of you are working ahead, which is wonderful. You still want to use the side that was given to you. Can anybody guess why you don't want to use the side you just found? Because it might be wrong. It's the number one reason. Any other reasons? So it is. It's kind of the reason. It's a decimal, as in is 7.3. It's not exact. We rounded, right? So if we rounded, plugged it in somewhere else, solved, rounded again, you could be off by multiple digits. So I prefer to use, and the number one reason, if you were wrong here and you use it again, you're wrong twice. So I like to use what they gave me and my side. So which trig function am I going to use here? Cosine. Cosine from 65 equals the adjacent, which is u, over the hypotenuse, which is 8. Multiply by 8. Yes, we get 3.4. Oof. All right, so we flip. We got 2 more. Doing the similar thing here. Find the values of x and y using sine and cosine. Again, the difference between today and tomorrow is I'm not going to tell you which trig function to use. You're just going to have to figure it out. So with 35 degrees, we're going to label all of our sides. Opposite, adjacent, and hypotenuse. Which letter would we like to solve for first?
X.
Sure. So we have x, which is the opposite. Which side did they give you? The hypotenuse. So which trig function are we going to use? Sine. Sine from 35 equals x over 53. multiply by 53.
30.4.
Yep, 30.4. Alright, and then for the next one, we're solving for y. And again, going to use the hypotenuse. So which trig function deals with the adjacent and hypotenuse? Cosine from 35 equals y over 53. Rounded to the 10th. Yeah, you did 53 twice, that's all. 43.4 we said? All right, good. Questions? Okay, so before we get to the problem below, we're going to talk about a couple words. The problem below is technically not a word problem, so there's nothing really for you to decipher. Next week we are doing word problems. So I'm going to start with teaching you some of the words we use. When you think of elevation, what direction do you think of? Up. And depression? Down. Okay, so there's a thing called angle of elevation and angle of depression. There is not a picture in your notes. If you would like to draw it, that'd be a smart idea. Elevation is the angle up from the horizontal. So if you see this girl on this boat, she is looking out the horizontal. Her eyes are tilted up towards the boy. She doesn't learn. So this is called an angle of elevation. An angle of depression, so here's a horizontal line, that would be from his eyesight to her, okay? So angle of depression, angle of elevation. They're actually going to be congruent, and here's why. What do we call a line that cuts through two horizontal lines? A transversal. So because this is a transversal, there are relationships built. What is the relationship called between the angle of depression and the angle of elevation?
Interior, opposite.
They're alternate interior, but that's good. So this one and this one are alternate interior. So they're actually going to be the same. We're going to have a scavenger hunt next week, and there are 2 word problems, and both of them involve angle of elevation and angle of depression. So the main things to know is that one of the rays is always horizontal. Always. And then angle of elevation or depression will tell you what direction the other ray goes. So angle of elevation would mean it goes up. Angle of depression would mean the other ray points down. Okay? So you already have the picture of a skiing somebody, something or other. So technically it's not a word problem, but you'll see they use the angle of depression on that one. So let's read it. You are skiing on a mountain with an altitude of 1,200 feet. Do we see 1,200 feet? We do. So a lot of students would, because this could be a word problem someday. A lot of students would try to put this as your elevation or your altitude, I think it used. What your altitude is the same thing as a height. When your doctor measures you, do they let you slouch? No. Do they let you lean over? No, they make you stand completely straight up. So altitude or height will always be from the ground straight up, okay? Because if the height from here to here is 1,200, the height from here to my skier is still 1,200. All right, so then the angle of depression. So if you look, that's where that 21 is. Here's the horizontal line we've been talking about. Then an angle downward. Which one of these would be the angle of elevation? Which would be congruent to depression? If this is 21...
alternate interior.
Yeah, the alternate interior would also be 21. It will help you later on just knowing that fact. It's not going to help us solve this problem, but for future reference, it would help. And then it says, find the distance x you ski down the mountain. We all ski on a slope, so that's why the x is sitting on the slope. So we're going to solve this just like we solve any other problem. From 21 degrees, we're going to label the sides we're given. What kind of side is 1,200? It's opposite. And then what kind of side is x? Hypotenuse, yeah. It's written on the inside of the triangle, but it's no different. Okay, so which trig function are we going to use? Sine. From, 21 equals my opposite, which is 1,200, over my hypotenuse, which is x. Can I solve it like this? No, so what do I need to do? Flip it. I'm going to write this over 1. Put 1 over sine of 21 equals x over 1200. We are going to get a large number. Let me catch up for a second. Multiply by 1200.
3,300.
I said let me catch up for a second. So you keep that for a second. It's hard to find the correct color that you could actually see on this. That's all. All right, so this is going to be the hypotenuse. So it's going to be the longest number. It's going to be way bigger than 1200. What is it?
3,348.5.
Round it to the nearest, what does it say? Foot. 3,349. And then feet. Ta-da.